Greetings, Magic the Gathering fans, I'm Gav. I make ARPG content and documentaries on the games that I love, and through my coverage of Grinding Gear games, one of their original 4 co-founders, Brian Weissman, reached out to me in the comments and over email. We've been chatting off and on ever since, and recently, we finally had the chance to sit down for a long conversation and record it. In this first part, I wanted to dive into Brian's rise to Magic fame in the 1990s and his early contributions to the game. A quick disclaimer, I've never played Magic the Gathering myself. I was born in 91 and grew up during the Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh craze. Magic always felt a little too complicated back then, and no one my age was really playing. That said, I've always appreciated the history and artwork behind the game, and who doesn't know what a Black Lotus is? Luckily, throughout this talk, Brian explains it all in a way that even an outsider like me can follow and enjoy, which is super appreciated. This will be the first of several long-form chats that Brian and I will be releasing. The next chat will cover topics like PC gaming in the 90s to 2000s, meeting Chris, Eric, and Jonathan through Diablo 2, forming Grinding Gear games, and all of the contributions that Brian brought to the foundations of Path of Exile. I told Brian for that chat just to go wild with any anecdotes about him, Chris, Eric, and Jonathan, or the early days of Grinding Gear games, so I'm super excited for that one. For context jumping into this talk, right before I hit record, we were talking about great screenwriters, specifically a documentary on David Milch that his friend produced. So the conversation kind of dives right in and we yap about Path of Exile for the first few bits. I've got all of the timestamps listed in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe to support the channel, and now without further ado, here's Brian Weissman.
What if I told you that David Milch wrote the scripts to all of those shows straight off the top of his head, dictated to a script like transcriber?
That's insane to me. I mean, I
Yeah,
absolutely love writing.
Not a team of writers in a room working on a script for like weeks and weeks, literally just sitting on the floor, looking up at the ceiling and narrating the script like a dialogue of 4 guys talking
Wow.
over a table. Insane.
Dialogue's the hardest part.
Yeah, by far. Tell me about it. I've tried. My efforts in PoE are veiled to you, which is probably a good thing. I can't remember if the closest one actually, which you probably did hear at one point. Do you remember what the duelist used to say before that whole thing was turned into a tribunal?
No, like in what context, in what part?
When he was in the hold of the ship, his little introductory thing.
Okay, no, I didn't play that early on. I started in 2016.
The first line was, "He had it coming." That was the first line of the dialogue. And then it was something like, the Lord should have known better than to insult my honor. Well, he sang a different tune with 6 inches of steel in his gut. And then it went from there. And it sounds like kind of bad Renaissance fair, honestly.
I mean, it worked.
At one point, I used the word not. Who the fuck says not?
I mean, it's very old English. It sounds, it kind of fits the timeline.
It is, but it's dumb, honestly.
Right.
Do better, Brian. But I wrote that dialogue back in like 2008, I think, because we were creating the tapestry. Are we recording now, by the way?
Yeah, we're on.
Oh, good. Okay, cool. We were creating the characters, right? We knew that we had like the basic D&D attribute-based tropes. We knew we were going to have 6 characters at the beginning, and we were going to introduce the Scion later on, because the Scion was complicated, and it's very, very, there's a lot of friction with new player acquisition, particularly when you're throwing the passive tree in their face. I've actually been talking a lot about this in the context of my own game, talking about the idea of how you need to introduce incremental complexity in a game, and you have to do a lot of hand-holding early to avoid these like friction points.
Mm-hmm.
Because when PoE launched for the first time, and for at least several years, the passive tree did not have notables in it. Unless I'm mistaken.
Screenshots. I think I've seen screenshots of that. It was just, stats, right?
Yeah, there was definitely, it had keystones, but there was definitely a period in time when the game had no notables. And what happened? I'm playing an ARPG for my first time ever. My friend told me Path of Exile is free and fun. What a cool game. Oh my God, look, the graphics aren't even that bad. It reminds me of Diablo, which I enjoyed. And I log in and I'm playing and whoa, I leveled up, open up the skill tree for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's massive information overload.
Yeah.
Oh my God, the possibilities. Gigabrains look at that and they go, think of the possibilities.
Yep.
And fundamentally, the people who get really, really into the game tend to be gigabrains. But most people are just incredibly intimidated by it. They're like, "Oh shit, it's scary.
Yeah.
Too many choices and I don't know what to do." So the reaction in most gamers who are like, first of all, they care about the character that they're playing, they're invested in it because we put a lot of work into creating an emotional tenor, an emotional environment that makes you feel invested. That's why I wrote the backstories for these guys, even though they weren't honestly that well represented by their dialogue at the end.
Yeah.
You're invested in the character and you care about the decisions you make. And we made it hard too, right? There's regret orbs. It clearly costs something to undo a choice,
Hmm.
but we're giving you that option to make mistakes. Most people don't know what the currency is worth. They don't know what anything is worth. And they go, okay, well, I don't know, what is a regret orb worth? I've never even seen one, but I'm pretty sure that I don't have one. Yeah, I definitely don't have one. So if I decide to take that and I don't like it, I'm going to regret it later.
Yep.
And people don't like to feel regret. So what's the correct solution? I just close the passive tree and keep killing. And 25 levels later, I have 25 skill points, plus a few more from quests. And my guy is like grinding now. The game's really hard,
Yeah.
but I'm tenacious and I'm dying all the time. But I don't want to spend my skill points. Very, very, very common point of friction. Enough to make people quit after they level up like
Yep.
one time in the Twilight Strand. So how to overcome this problem? We hold your hand, and 3 nodes out, we put something called Heart of the Gladiator or whatever. And by the way, I named all of these. If you like the notable beef, my idea.
All of the keystones.
I was
Beef is a popular
I was
one.
at GGG naming the keystones, and I'm like, I'm gonna call this one beef, and everyone's like, no, you can't call it beef. Are you crazy? That's so dumb. And I'm not. Think about it. It has 2 meanings. Right? You're strong
Mhm.
and you got a beef with the monsters.
It's
And
perfect.
so it ultimately found its way into the game. Anyway, you put notables all over the thing as little enticements and goals to go for. Suddenly people want to spend skill points. They're like, shit, that's only 4 nodes away and I've got 4. Click, 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 done. Got it. Wow, my guy's way more powerful. I kind of am starting to grasp this. It totally transformed how people could interact with the passive tree.
Yeah.
And anyway, why did I get started talking about keystones anyway?
We were just talking about the complexities of Path of Exile and how that can be kind of a quitting point for some players.
Yeah. Prior to that, though, I started talking about keystones for a reason. Can't remember.
Just how they were basically nodes that were landmarks for people to actually go after when they open up the tree,
Yeah.
rather than just the cluster that you guys had before.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think about where, like, backing up one level in the conversation, why I started talking
Oh.
about that. That may happen a few times. The way that my mind storytells
It's
is
layered.
in like layers of an onion, or like imagine it's crazy. My thoughts are like reading off the top of a deck, flipped off the top of a deck at high speed, and I just read the words off. It's how my brain works. I see the words that I speak in real time as 3-dimensional objects, just like a constant 3-dimensional spool of video in my mind that I just describe in vivid detail.
Well, let me try and
We're talking about David Milch, though.
yeah.
Yeah, David Milch, who is like an unbelievable generational storytelling genius who could come up with entire plots of like network shows off the froth of his mind without editing. It's
Insane.
beyond description. Anyway, Mark Ostrich did a documentary about David Milch, and Mark and I were talking last year sometime, I think. We were doing an interview for a documentary that we're developing actually about Magic's inaugural class. Magic the Gathering's inaugural class, and how they've transformed the world. And I was storytelling to him, and he just is standing there, and he's just recording, and he looks at me, and I get what's going on in his eyes. And so I ask his question for him. I say, Mark, have you ever seen anyone who can do what I do? And he goes, only one person ever, and it was David Milch. So that's kind of what my storytelling ability is.
Yeah.
Talking gives me dopamine more than anything else I've ever experienced in my life. And honestly, of all the things that could give you dopamine, like wingsuit flying, I would choose talking above all else.
It's pretty accessible.
Magic and gaming certainly give me a lot of it too, but nothing makes me happier than talking. So thank you for inviting me to speak today on whatever topics we entreat, I guess.
I'm super, super glad to have you, Brian. So you want to start off with Magic the Gathering, perhaps? Talk a little bit about your up and coming era in the 90s?
Yeah. God, where to begin? You know how penicillin and lots of other drugs have been created through fortunate accident?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's, for me, that's sort of what magic was. I think that I've thought back a long time, and I think that if I don't get introduced to it in the way that I did, I might not have ever played it. There's a high possibility I would have never played it. And even if I did, it would have taken years.
So the stars
So
aligned for you to begin playing.
yep, the stars in this case, I believe, are the same day that I met my wife, incidentally, like much later.
Wow.
So there's two like huge events that are tied to that same day, the 14th of January.
That's crazy.
And I was attending my friend Andrew's birthday party. Andrew is part of my childhood friend circle. He was like one of 4 people basically that were the core friend group. And his house was always the nexus for all of the get-togethers that my friends had when we were like, I don't know, age 7 or 8 and older, all the way through high school and even beyond. So like during weekends and stuff, when people were in town from college, we would convene at Andrew's house. So I was there for his birthday, and I had just turned 19 years old. So I was in my junior year at UC Santa Cruz, where I was totally, utterly aimless. I had no fucking clue what I was doing there. I'm like, why am I at this dumb school? Why do I have to get up every morning and listen to professors talk and study this mostly just stupid shit, honestly? I took one good course in college, and it was taught by Tom Lehrer. You ever heard of him?
No. What did he teach?
Mathematics. He was like a mathematics genius who actually was a singer-songwriter also. And he was like an absurdist singer-songwriter. I heard him as a kid on an old radio program called Dr. Demento. And he had like random songs about new math and stuff. And he's clanging away on a piano. Not kidding. This guy winds up being my math professor at UC Santa Cruz. And it was a class called The Nature of Math. It was very interesting, and I learned a lot. It was the only class I think I took at college that I really enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else was like horrible drudgery, honestly. And so I'm like, what the fuck am I doing here? Why do I have to spend all this time doing this? It's like a waste of my life. And I would travel on the weekends down to Palo Alto, California, which is where I grew up. I was born in 1974 in November and grew up as a latchkey Gen X kid. And went to college at 17, not because I was some kind of academic prodigy, but just because I entered the kindergarten when I was 4.
Started early.
Which is pretty standard for the time. Yeah. So I was like decent academically. I didn't apply myself at all. So I did the absolute bare minimum to get into a UC because I was told that was important.
Yep.
And no more. So anyway, I would travel down to Palo Alto from UC Santa Cruz, and I was down there for my friend Andrew's birthday. And one of our number, who was a close kind of peripheral friend named Jeff, brought his Magic collection and 2 starter decks of Unlimited Edition.
Awesome.
How familiar are you with Magic?
Hardly at all. I know about TCGs. I played Hearthstone. I play a little bit of Lorcana nowadays, but yeah, not too much about
a lot of
Magic.
people. Gotcha. A lot of people in your audience, though, will understand this.
Oh yeah,
just because of the context.
Yeah, go off.
This was January of 1994, and the sets in stores in 1994 were mostly Unlimited Edition, which is a very ironic title when you consider it, given the fact that it was basically sold out globally the instant it came out. And there was the dregs of Arabian Nights were also in stores. And I think the packs had already increased in price from 99 cents. They're now like 3,000 and have been as high as 5,000 each. Marked up to like $1.99. And anyway, my friend Jeff had brought 2 starter decks of Unlimited Edition to Andrew's birthday party, and they cracked open the cards. And then Jeff had his own collection, and my 4 friends, I think it was 4, sat down on the floor of Andrew's bedroom and played Magic while I sat nearby going, man, I'm bored out of my mind, because we had all these plans for what the party was going to be.
Yeah.
We did a lot of like physical, we played tag a lot, even well into teenage years. And so we were planning on doing some like tag variant. And instead of playing tag on a beautiful day, and I guess it's beautiful for Palo Alto standards,
Right.
in January, instead of going outside and playing, they're just playing this stupid game on the floor. Because my friends are all gamers, but when it comes to board games, they're dilettantes. Even actually in most games, when they played games as kids, they never really got super into them.
Yeah.
Except for my good friend Obi, who is actually a co-founder of my current company, and who factors into this story quite a bit. Actually,
Nice.
Obi was a min-maxer like me and very competitive and always wanting to win at Monopoly and stuff. The rest of the guys were basically like dilettantes. They would get a game because they had heard about it or read about it, and they would spend a couple hours puzzling out the rules, play it a couple times, put it on the shelf, get another game. They never focused on anything. And so that was kind of how I related to all of our board gaming experiences, and I just lumped Magic into that. So I was just bored. I'm like barely paying attention, restless, thumbing through Andrew's comics and stuff. Eventually, they finished this 4-player game, which took like hours because they had to puzzle out the rules on the tiny little
read every
insurance
card.
But no, it's like the rule book is literally this big. They couldn't make it large because of the size of a starter deck.
Yep.
It's tiny, so the font is like microscopic.
That's hilarious. They didn't
It's
think
hilarious.
to fold up a piece of paper.
How do you express the rules of a game as complicated as Magic in a little white rule book?
Yeah.
So they're like trying to figure out the rules, and nobody has any idea how to play, not even Jeff, I'm sure. And eventually the game ends, and I'm like, awesome, guys, let's go play. And they go, we're going to play again. At which point I had to relent. So I said, all right, well, if you're going to play again, at least like let me join. I'm bored.
Yeah.
So I took one of Jeff's decks, and Obi picked up another one of Jeff's decks, and we went downstairs to Andrew's kitchen, and we sat down and we played my first game of Magic ever at a kitchen table, very appropriately.
Perfect.
And I was playing a green-blue deck, and Obi, I think, was playing either mono green or green red or something.
Mm-hmm.
And we got in this long stalemate where I had a flying crawworm out, and I was attacking with this flying crawworm. And I got my Obi down low, but then he dealt with it somehow. And so we got into this ridiculous stalemate, and he eventually got Gaia's Liege in play. And it's, as an unlimited card, it's all glowing. It's really beautiful.
Epic.
And he starts turning all of my lands into forests. Eventually, all of my lands are forests, and I'm supposed to be helpless. And he gets so many creatures in play, he finally attacks with everything. And I look at my hand, and I have Fog in my hands. I play Fog. Creatures deal no damage in combat. And Obi's like, oh shit, that's a card in Magic.
Stole a card.
And I go, yep, it is. Die. And I counterattack and kill him. And I win my first game of Magic ever. And I'm like, there's something here.
Mm-hmm.
There's something deep in the bedrock. I talked to you earlier, I don't know if we recorded it, about resonance. And those experiences exist in the real world. Magic is fundamentally, I mean, it looks like, well, these are actually cards from, hold on, it looks like an image of a guy like doing something. Very typical like modern art.
Mm-hmm.
Although this card's, I guess, pretty old. It's Momentary Blink. Either way, the cards are all math, right? It's math and timing, exactly like the real world. So, sorry, I lost track of
You're fine.
my frame of reference from the. Can you back me up a second?
Yeah, the resonance of Magic, basically.
Thank you. Yeah. So, yeah, we can edit that out in post.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, one consequence of my layered Inception stuff is sometimes I lose my way, and I might wind up on a lower level. What's that?
Which layer were you on?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I have to like incept back to where it was, and then I can continue instantly. Sometimes it's like the way that it manifests is I'll loop back into a conversation that I might have been having a month prior with somebody. Like, I'll see them and I'll be like, where I left off a month ago, and I'm instantly back into doing it again.
That's awesome.
It's crazy. So magic is resonance. It's math. Your thoughts are mathematical resonance. They're nothing else, and neither are you, fundamentally. And it resonated with my mind. There was something deep in the math of that game that I just instantaneously recognized. And I love the flavor. It was fantasy flavor.
The art.
And winning and the art. Fuck, man, the original cards look so good. They draw you in. I'm going to grab a few examples.
Oh, let's see it.
All right, these are not the best representation.
Dear God, that binder, man.
Oh, this is my this is my
That's
play binder
awesome.
to build decks out of. Speaking of Gaia's Liege, look at this thing.
Oh, that is so cool.
Illustrated, I believe, by Damian Willick. So this card, looking exactly like this, basically, only with a white border, was sitting across the table from me in my first game of Magic, and I just looked at that guy.
Yeah,
Look at his face.
I know. The elk horns
You know,
coming off.
and just the expression of him. You know, Damien painted this guy a very particular way. Maybe it was inspired by his grandfather or something. You know, you don't really know.
Right.
Either way, it left a memory, like a really strong eidetic memory forever. And a lot of Magic cards in the early days were like that. Island, so simple, iconic, beautiful, like zoomed out painting by Mark Poole.
It's actually
I've seen
crazy.
the original art. I've seen the original art for this island, by the way.
The simplicity.
Like held it in my hands. The stark simplicity,
Yeah.
exactly. That is resonance. It's like your brain can understand it and grab onto it and form. There's enough bandwidth left to tell yourself a story about the card.
Yeah.
But when you look at a big jumbled pile of modern artwork images, the fuck is this?
Right.
What are you looking at here? You have to study it, like puzzle it out, because it's a giant digital painting or maybe an AI painting.
Right.
There's a million little details.
So
There's
is that-
so
is
much
that
there
modern
that there's nothing
versus-
left to, there's nothing left to feel anything for the card anymore.
Yeah.
If you can't feel for the card, you can't truly understand it. You definitely can't wield it. I'll show you a few other examples. Might be my favorite artwork in Magic.
I can't read the name. What is it?
Mox Sapphire.
Mox. Okay. That's beautiful.
It is so gorgeous, iconic, stark, simple. All the way across the room,
Yeah.
in a giant room full of Magic players, you can see when someone has a Mox Sapphire on in play. And whenever you put one into play, people come around and like take selfies with them and stuff. They're so special.
Yeah.
And honestly, for all of the fucking sacrilege, heresy that Wizard of the Coast has abetted, participated in, profited from in this space, they've adhered to one rule so far. They haven't broken it. And probably only for legal reasons, if I had to guess. I think they would do it in a heartbeat if they thought they could get away with it. The reserved list in Magic, which I've talked about a ton on camera. Anyway, I don't want to get into that. We'll come to that later. Too many digressions. Let's get back to the story. So as soon as I play Magic, I'm like, I have to do this for the rest of my life. This is what I was meant to do. I can just tell instantly. I've never encountered anything like that in my life before or since.
Wow.
Other than her in the other room. And I started devoting all of my brain power to the game. And it really gave me a sense of really what I wielded. I didn't really understand it at all. In fact, I didn't understand it truly until fairly recently. I would say within the last couple of years. But it was a giant moment for me of like, there's something here that I need to explore. And so I approached it from day one as a giant puzzle to solve. And it happened to have beautiful flavor, but I was really much more interested in the puzzle.
Yeah.
I wanted to master the game, to understand it on an elemental level. And I had an incredible partner in crime for this, effectively. Again, amazing coincidence. His name is Matt Wallace, and he's worth looking up. He's become a really big deal in the cloud computing space. And in fact, a lot of modern cloud computing owes to Matt's genius.
Wow.
He and I ran into each other at a Street Fighter 2 tournament on like his first or second day in town in the fall of, I think, yeah, it would have been 1993. And we were the two best competitive Super Street Fighter 2 players in all of Santa Cruz for sure, and extending all the way out to Sunnyvale Golfland probably is where the that's where the better players were.
Yeah.
And as soon as I was introduced to Magic, literally my first thought after I had won that game against Obi, talked about it a little bit, I walked down to a local comic book store that happened to be one of the very few places on planet Earth that had unlimited edition cards. And I bought 2 starter decks of unlimited for, I think, $6.99 each, or maybe $7.99. Incidentally, I sold a brick of those things recently
Unopened?
for some like, yeah, it was a box sold signed by Steve Wozniak. You can believe it.
Wow.
Yeah, an unlimited box of Magic cards that was signed by Steve Wozniak right in front of me when I was buying the cards from him, actually from him and his son down in Santa Clara. That was back in 2019, which
That
is
is
another
insane.
totally ridiculous story.
What? The amount of people that
Just
you
hanging out
know
with
and have
Steve
interacted
Wozniak.
with, Brian.
Speaking of storytelling, Gavryn, I had him like transfixed for 3 hours. I'm not kidding. Like
Yeah.
sitting across from me, eyes locked, transfixed, listening to me talk to him about Magic for like 3 hours.
I believe it.
He barely uttered a breath the whole time. It was amazing. And he gave me his card afterward, which I have in my drawer. It's like a metal, it's a solid metal business card that has like a serrated edge for cutting things on airplanes.
Wow. Multi-purpose. That's amazing.
Yeah. Anyway, Matt, my friend, Matt Wallace, is an objective genius. He really is. And the two of us just met playing Street Fighter. We were instantaneously after our rivalry, and I was a little bit better than him, so I beat him in the first tournament.
Nice.
And we became very, very close friends. We hung out all the time talking and playing Street Fighter. And as soon as I saw Unlimited in my hands, I'm like, I got to go show this to Matt.
Yeah.
And so I went back to Santa Cruz. I said, Matt, take a look at this game. There's something here. It's insane. Like, it's so fun. We need to play. He and I sat down and we did nothing but play Magic for the next maybe 3 or 4 months.
Oh my God.
Fuck class. Like,
Yep.
I'm sitting in class, like designing decks, nothing going on in the background, just and cataloging my entire collection from my mind, like card by card, binder page after binder page. I've got like, I've got 3 of those and 5 of those, and just going down the whole thing, like completely intertwining my mind
Yep.
with the mathematical resonance of Magic. And Matt and I set to work on solving the game because the internet existed back in 1994, but it was in this rudimentary form that you've probably heard of called the Usenet. Have you ever used the Usenet at all?
Nope. It was before my time. I was born in 91.
Yeah. It's so crazy. How the fuck am I so old? Like,
you don't look a day over 40, man. Like, you look
thanks, man.
great.
I think that is objectively true, particularly if you saw me like not through the lens.
You look amazing, man. Like,
thank you.
I've got the dad bod going on. I was going to ask you as one of the random questions, like how you stay in such good shape.
I will give you a lecture. I assure you. Anyway, Matt and I are we're consumed by the idea of solving this problem. Both of us, actually, even though we don't really know it at the time. So while other people are just hobbyists and they're playing like, oh, let's come play against my fire-breathing troll deck,
They didn't see.
Matt and I are just like putting the hammer down and just grinding and testing, paying attention, talking about every interaction, every card. Why did you lose that game? What happened? You were winning by so much.
Yeah.
I had 280 mana in play because I've got Antiquities lands and Candelabras. How the fuck did I lose the game? How do you lose a game where you have that many more resources than your opponent? What's wrong? What's going on? What fundamentally matters? And I noticed something right away in the data. Whoever drew more cards tended to win the game. It was just like how it seemed to work. It's like all things being equal, if there were events that caused you to draw cards that didn't catastrophically cost you position, tempo, or whatever, you tended to win. So Matt's like, well, what if we make a deck of like all the card drawing cards that we own collectively? Because you don't have unlimited cards. Unlimited edition, again, ironically called that, was only available in my entire ecosystem, like including all of Northern California, basically, in one store. there was a store in Palo Alto, California called Gamescape. And for whatever reason, and there was different rumors about why it was true, Gamescape had a steady drip of heroin when all the other dealers were bone dry.
Yeah.
They had like boxes of unlimited edition in their the back room.
Hmm.
And every morning when the store opened up, someone was charged with going and taking one of those boxes, opening up all 36 booster packs and putting the commons in a long box for, I believe, 5 cents each. And all the uncommons were $1, every rare $2. It didn't matter what they were.
Wow.
They only knew that they were rare. Nobody had any idea about what was really actually good.
Yeah.
And you could literally go into that binder and there would be moxes sitting in the binder.
Insane.
Beautiful, pristine, pack fresh.
Oh my God.
If you've ever opened one of those vintage packs, even like 30 years later, they still have that distinctive Cardamundi ink smell.
Yeah. I've watched many
A pack fresh Mox Sapphire, just like the one I showed you, for $2.
Insane.
And there was no rationing of it either. You could go in and buy every rare. And eventually that's started to happen once people started to realize that the cards actually had value. And then I think they just ran out also. But Matt and I got whatever cards we could get. We traded a ton.
Mm-hmm.
We played for ante because playing for ante was a big part of the culture back then. If you're going to play a game of Magic, the little booklet specifically said that you played for ante. Here's my deck, Gavryn. Let's start. You go, okay, I'm going to cut you here. And the top card is Preordain, which is not vital to how this deck wins, fortunately, but a good tool. And now that Preordain is set aside, I do the same thing to you, and those two cards are permanently contested.
Oh, wow.
That was Richard Garfield's original intention with the game because there was no precedent at all in all of gaming for anything like Magic. People generally tended to be hobbyists, and even I think the hardcore D&D players didn't pump like $1,000 a year into their hobby because there just wasn't that much to buy.
Right.
You know, you buy the books, you buy the dice, you buy some nice little character folders and stuff, and you buy modules, but you can't really spend that much money on a hobby like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so Richard Garfield, quite rightly, assumed that the average gamer would probably only spend maybe $20 to $30 a year on Magic, maybe 40 to 50 if they got lucky, because that was the standard of the time.
Yeah.
They never imagined that people would go absolutely berserk for the game and spend like all of their entire collective income on it, trying to hoover up every Magic card in their entire community, basically, which is what people would do. So he envisioned, and imagine you're playing with an environment of like 4 or 5 friends. You all have spent $30. And Stan has a Shivan Dragon in his deck. He just happened to get it in his starter deck. And Stan is like the big swinging dick of the group because he's got a Shivan.
Yeah.
Every time he puts it into play, and he's definitely playing red, everyone's like, fuck, Dan's Shivan is out again. Oh my God, come over and look. Every time he plays it, he gets this like giant validation dopamine hit too. And it's a beautiful painting. Imagine framed in black. I'll show it to you.
You just have one handy.
Of Melissa. Oh, yes. It's Melissa Benson's Timeless Painting. It's so insane. I've seen this card live also. For the painting for it. Shivan Dragon.
Oh my God, that looks so good.
Gorgeous. It's such a beautiful piece
Reminds me of the Dragon Ball Z dragon.
Well, I'm sure it directly inspired it.
Looks awesome.
Because it's iconic. And it's about to eat you. You notice?
Yeah.
It's looming above the battlefield, about to either eat you or torch you, right? It's an insane painting. And anytime that rare dragon, they only printed 1,000 of them in alpha. Anytime it came into play, people would take notice. So Dan's got a Shivan. Well, it's not fair that Dan just is the only guy with the Shivan Dragon, and he definitely won't trade it. So if the anti-mechanic is existing in this ecosystem, it's possible that if Dan plays his Shivan, eventually he's going to anti it, just through pure chance, which now means that Fred can win Stan's Shivan. He gets a chance to have it now. And the cards flow around the community. And then eventually next year you buy $30 more worth and introduce it into the pool.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they expected. So the games like Balance and stuff also was built around that. The idea of scarcity and playing for ante, and that individual cards being rare had an impact on their availability as well.
Yeah.
So this totally affected how Matt and I had to play the game. We were required to go and trade as much as possible to try to get the pieces. There was sure as hell no Star City Games or Card Kingdom to get cards. You actually had to problem solve and win games of Magic to get more collection. How cool is that of a concept?
Super cool.
And that's really what existed in those austere years. You had you were either a rich motherfucker and you had tons of disposable income, which very few people in that demographic had,
Yeah.
or you had to just bust your ass. You had to figure out a strategy to acquire cards. I had no money at all, like no financial support at all, other than my parents co-chipping in for my college tuition at UC Santa Cruz.
hmm
But I had no stipend. I was not working at the time because I was going to school. I had no money basically. And
Yeah.
so I had to figure out ways to get cards. Anyway, collectively, Matt and I play hundreds and hundreds of games, grinding and getting closer to the solution. And so by the time that we made this revelation, which would have been probably April of 2024, we pool our resources together, all of our card drawing resources together
hmm
into an amalgamated deck. And it starts annihilating everything right away. It had like, I don't remember what the restricted rules allowed. I think you could play with multiple brain geysers at the time, or maybe we didn't even have a restricted list yet. 'Cause that was something that was kind of like a distant rumor off in the distance. I'm trying to think about when Antiquities came out, because I was definitely not playing a deck with restrictions in Antiquities release. Are you familiar with the restricted list?
Is that just cards that are banned from standard play, or?
It's not actually. It's a really interesting innovation, an adaptation to the problem that began to occur once they printed the unlimited edition. Because there was so few alpha and so few beta for the whole planet that when those sets came out, again, you had that situation where one community might have one Mox or one Black Lotus.
Yeah.
You couldn't really consolidate a lot of ownership. If you were using the Usenet, which we brought up before, it's using the Usenet is like navigating MS-DOS, only in internet context.
Yeah.
You have to navigate through these endless directories to find your way to a conversation rather than just Google searching and clicking a link or whatever. So you had to know all of the navigational commands to even use the Usenet and how to use a modem. There were just all these points of friction and stuff.
Right.
But it was kind of the first place where you could actually acquire cards. I have a crazy story about one of my first experiences on the Usenet, which would have been at least transactional ones, late 1994. I logged in one day into the Usenet, into the marketplace, and there
Yeah.
was a title at the very top that had just gone on live, and it said, "Beta booster box for sale, $500." That's 36, sealed box with 36 beta packs in it.
Insane.
Beta packs are worth like $8,000 each now or something.
Was everything from the old days pretty much open by now? Like, how hard is it to find something unopened, and who had the foresight to keep packs unopened back then?
That's an amazingly good question. I would say that the answer is it's unknown.
Yeah.
Some of my friends would probably be a reasonably good authority to guess because they're so, like Chris Wilson, for example, his
Mhm.
Magic card collection is quite famous.
Yeah.
And it is legendary. It's really insane.
I can only imagine.
Yeah. He would know probably more than anyone because Chris at one point he owned a number of vintage boxes, which he bought not even for the investment. It's just like to own that piece of history
Yeah.
out of respect and deference.
Seriously.
And in fact, a horrible tragedy happened to him a couple of years ago.
Oh my
It would
gosh.
have caused a deep imbalance to the universe. All right, I want to pivot back to the storytelling stuff about Magic. So
Yeah.
Matt and I tinker around with our designs. We're playing aggressively, trading all the time, building up our collections. And by, I believe, late April or early May, we have what we believe is the solution, or at least the closest thing that we can build to the solution based on the tools that existed at the time. And prior to that, we had iterated on all these different designs. We were competing and traveling as much as we could because Matt had a car. And we had tried a deck built around protecting yourself, like build a fortress, put all these enchantments and stuff into play to protect yourself, circles
Mhm.
of protection and stuff. And walls, does this work as a strategy? And we called it the protection deck. And then we built a direct damage deck. What if you just bolt and Chain Lightning and Psionic Blast your opponent to death and put Black Vices into play. And maybe you attack them with little creatures. Does that work? We had tried the direct damage deck. It even had like Onxa Mishra in it. We tried a land destruction deck. Is that a viable strategy? Kill all the lands, right? They can't play anything. This new deck that we had built made an utter mockery of all of those designs. Like, it wasn't even close. It was like we were playing two different formats, because the deck that we built, which we called the deck, because there was no other superlative to describe it.
Yeah.
It wasn't the direct damage deck. It wasn't the LD deck. It just beat everything. So we called it the deck. And its core engine, the thing that made it totally degenerate, was a condensate of the ideas fundamentally of card advantage. At the time, there were two cards that were massive, unrestricted outliers in the format. And again, the restricted list is not like Hearthstone. In Hearthstone, you know how you're limited? Like, imagine if every card in Magic was legendary. That's the restricted list.
Okay.
It's a subset of cards you're only allowed to play with one copy of in your deck. So by the time we were building this deck to compete with it for the first time on like a big stage, we were now playing by the restricted list, which was kind of like coming down from on high from the Olympus of Wizards of the Coast over there.
Yeah.
And there were three enormous outliers on the restricted list, and two in particular that were a perfect kind of condensate of the central themes of the deck, card advantage. One of those cards was called Mind Twist. And Mind Twist, oh my God, could you imagine if it were in Hearthstone? Your opponent might take 2 turns before your opponent had a full hand again.
Oh no.
Because Hearthstone's so fucking ridiculous. Magic, like old school Magic, is much more similar to the way that Alpha Hearthstone was. If you think about how few ways there were to get card advantage in that environment. I don't know, did you play back that long ago?
Yeah. Yeah. That would have been Arcane Intellect and a few rogue abilities that were able to
Exactly.
draw.
Everything is value trading, right?
Yeah.
That's like this whole that guy who called himself Trump. If you ever saw his stream, he was like
the Value Town guy, right?
The mayor of Value Town.
Mayor of Value Town, yep.
The mayor of Value Town ran out on a rail covered in feathers and tar a long time ago. Because modern Hearthstone is like, oh my God, I've overdrawn like 11 cards this game.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
what
ridiculous.
Even is value?
Yeah, what even is? It's meaningless, right? It's so stupid. Anyway, so so the card Mind Twist, if it existed in particularly old Hearthstone, imagine it's the card just has a value of X essentially in Hearthstone, and it says essentially spend. Actually, you can even decide how much mana you spend on it. It scales, so you don't have to pay the full amount. Pay 5 mana. Opponent discards 4 cards at random, and that would be in original Hearthstone.
Yeah.
How insane would that be, right? It's like, I just hit 5 mana, your whole hand is discarded.
Yeah, they'd be top decking the rest of the game.
Exactly. You top deck literally every single turn. And in Magic, it's way worse because almost half your cards are lands that do nothing. Mind Twist is absolutely insane. I eventually led a campaign that was successful to get the card banned from Magic for a lot of years.
Yeah.
And everybody attributed that to me, and like some people liked it and some people were very angry about it.
Yeah.
Anyway, Mind Twist was one of the cards in the deck. We had 4 copies of it because it hadn't been restricted yet.
Wow.
And the card would be restricted a few months later when a guy named Bo Bell used it to win U.S. Nationals. Like, he annihilated the field running 4 Mind Twists. And I was like, why is this card allowed?
Yeah.
Yeah, totally degenerate. So we had 4 copies of Mind Twists. To abet those, we had 4 copies of a card called Mana Vault, which is a 1 mana artifact, and it says you can tap it to generate 3. It has the catch that to untap it, you have to wait until your upkeep, and you have to commit 4 mana to untapping it. And if you don't untap it, it pings you for a damage every turn.
Oh, wow.
So it's like, one-shot mana ability. It's very much like there's a card called Dark Ritual, which is kind of like a black version of this, but Dark Ritual doesn't have a downside. Anyway, Mana Vault allows you to accelerate that card Mind Twist dramatically.
Yeah.
You can like go turn 1 land Mana Vault, next turn land Twist for 4. Or sorry, that's Twist for 5? 4. Mind Twist for 4 mana on turn for 4 cards on turn 2. Like, utterly devastating. You only have 7 cards in your hand and like 2 or 3 of them are land. If you get Mind Twisted for 4 on turn 2, what are the chances that you ever play another card the rest of the game? other than like a few lands off the top before you die.
Yeah.
It's so lethal.
That's
And so we
disgusting.
had four copies of Mana Vault, and then finally the linchpin, 4 copies of a card called the Library of Alexandria. Or maybe it's just Library of Alexandria. Yeah, I think it's just Library of Alexandria, which is a land designed by Richard Garfield in the Arabian Nights expansion. And the card seemingly is innocuous. It says tap to add 1 what's now called generic mana to your mana pool, which is basically like mana Hearthstone. You can use, the mana's granular, so you can use any Hearthstone mana to cast anything.
Okay.
In Magic, mana has colors usually. So in this case, the Library of Alexandria makes only generic mana, which is mana of no particular color. It used to be called colorless.
Mm-hmm.
And it does that. And if you have exactly 7 cards in your hand, which you conveniently have at the start of every game, you can tap it to draw a card.
Oh, wow.
So in a game where like games are often decided by 1 or 2 cards, like I've got 2 extra cards in my hand because I was patient and got these interactions, and you're out, and now I win because I have 2 cards extra. Library gives you 1 card every turn for free, basically. All you have to do is tap it. We had 4 copies of that card too. So 4 libraries, 4 Mind Twists, 4 Mana Vaults, the deck. The rest of it was basically irrelevant, honestly.
Wow.
Only in this case, it was like 4 Juggernauts and I think a couple of Mahamudi Djinns, which is big blue flyer. And then it had removal spells, disenchant, sword splashers, counter spells. The deck was insanely degenerate because of the core engine, but it was still a very standard control deck.
Yeah.
In addition to that. And between Matt and me, we had 5 copies of Library of Alexandria, which was problematic because in order for us to both go to the event to play the deck, we needed 8. And we decided that we just had to wager on it. I found this very recently. D&D players in the audience would appreciate these. I'm going to show them to the camera. I recently found in a box from years and years and years ago my childhood D&D dice.
Those are awesome.
Look at these things. Look how pretty this is.
So colorful.
So colorful, so glittery. They literally look like gemstones.
That's awesome.
And I loved them as a kid, but I think probably children thought that they were candy.
Yeah.
And kids would probably pop these in their mouth and choke to death on them.
Could
So they
definitely
probably
see
had
that.
to. Yeah. And then also they're hard to read. You can just see.
Yeah.
There's no white dots. That's a 19 right there. But you get the idea. Anyway, Matt and I sat down on the floor of my dorm in Santa Cruz, and we rolled a 20-sided die to see who would go to represent the Brain Trust at this huge-ass Magic event called Manifest up in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And Matt won the die roll, so he went off to represent us. But I knew that it was in good hands. He was a very good player.
Mm-hmm.
And Matt annihilated everyone in what was probably, I think it was single elim. And it was like a huge 256-man single elim bracket.
Wow.
He eliminates everybody, sweeping every opponent all the way to the finals. And he plays against a guy who what's amazing is I had this story told to me from the other side like 20 years later. I was having dinner with Andrew Finch, who used to be the director of organized play, I think, at Wizards for years.
Mm.
And Finch and I are sitting there talking about the past. He also used to be the guy who would call out the drafts on the early Pro Tour, like over the microphone.
Yeah.
Anyway, Finch is telling me about this tournament that he played in back in the mid-1990s. He didn't know who he played against. I don't even think he remembered the name of the event. But there was no forgetting the story. I'll tell it from his perspective.
Yeah.
He sits down to play. He's undefeated playing land destruction, which is one of the nastiest fucking strategies in Magic.
Mm.
Anybody that's ever tried to play Magic against someone playing land destruction, what would it be like?
It sounds mean.
It would be like bestiality, all right, to borrow a crude analogy. Even when it's really good, it still sucks.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's like you play against people. The game's still like fairly casual back then. You know, people are playing in their first tournament and stuff. Playing LD that's hardcore because most people don't even understand mana ratios. People are there to have fun. You know, they want to play their Shivan Dragons.
Mm-hmm.
They've got one. And you're killing their lands starting on turn 1. And after 3 or 4 turns, they can't play anything.
Yeah.
And there's a black vice in play that makes them take 3 damage every time their turn starts. And so they just sit there bleeding out and dying and discarding, and it's awful. So Andrew Finch has been playing a merciless land destruction deck, and he's crushed everyone on his side of the bracket. These 2 guys are meeting in the finals. So Andrew sits down, and his deck is humming, and he's playing against this kind of awkward, rather tall, pudgy kid with glasses who looks like he's about 18 years old, but he talks really fast. And he's heard, rumor has it, that the kid is wielding some crazy ass deck. But Andrew has tested his deck extensively, and he knows how good it is. It's lean tuned land destruction deck. He believes that he's favored, and he's maybe a little bit cocky. So when they sit down and it gets ready to see who goes first, when the kid asks you, hey, can I play first, please? I know that you work for Wizards of the Coast or whatever. Maybe he didn't at the time, but you're a legend. Everyone's saying how unbeatable your deck is. And you know you're going to win. Just let me go first. You're so confident that you go, go ahead. Sure, whatever. And the guy goes, turn 1, draw a card because you didn't skip your first draw step. Draw an 8th card. Land Mox, Soul Ring, tap Soul Ring, Mana Vault, tap Mana Vault, or play another Mox, and Mind Twist for like 6 cards on turn 1. And I just made up the math there, so it might be
7?
5. Don't hold it against me. Turn 1, like Mind Twist for 5 or 6.
Yeah.
Turn 1, before Andrew had even gone. He has 7 cards in his hand, now he has 2.
Oh my gosh.
Andrew draws a card and says, done. He can't even play anything because he got 3 lands Mind Twisted out of his hand.
Yeah.
And Matt untaps and goes, Juggernaut. Next turn, Juggernaut. Beat, dead. Andrew plays no cards. They go into game 2, and Andrew this time goes first because he's like, fuck if I'm going to let you play first again.
Right.
And they start, and he kills every single land. He goes like, turn 1, Birds of Paradise, kill your land, kill your land, kill your land, kill your land. Matt has no more land, and he dies horribly, which is kind of how the deck normally performs.
Yeah.
They go into game 3. And Matt goes, now keep in mind, Matt got to go first twice because Andrew let him.
Right.
Go first once. Matt goes like turn 1, land, Mox, Soul Ring, Black Lotus, Mana Vault, twist your entire hand away on turn 1. Mind Twist for 7 on turn 1. No
That's
card.
Nuts.
And of course, he offers no resistance. A Juggernaut comes down like 3 or 4 turns later, and that's it. So Matt wins Manifest. It's proof of concept. Like, we figured this out. And at that point, what do you really do, right? We can play this deck against other people, but it just feels like so degenerate and nasty. And fortunately, right away, that Nationals tournament happened. And Library of Alexandria got restricted down to 1, and Mind Twist got restricted down to 1 also. And so the deck was effectively heavily nerfed.
Yeah.
At that point, Matt, actually, we were like right in this period where ISPs were spooling up like crazy out in the Bay Area. And one of them was called, I think, Netcom. And they were hiring people, good engineers and stuff, directly out of college and paying them very good wages.
Yeah.
Because the internet was like growing massively. You know, America Online, I think, was already out, and they were making billions. So there was millions of ISPs trying to pop up to serve that role.
Yeah.
And Matt saw an opportunity to go work in the tech industry, and he just left Santa Cruz, dropped out, and went to go work there. And that left me alone as our brain trust. We stopped playing and communicating really.
Yeah.
And I set to work trying to find replacements for these 2 degenerate effects, the Scepter and the Library and the Mind Twist, which were now both one-ups. And I just looked at the next best options, and I found those options in a card that basically everybody had completely dismissed. In fact, the only person I had ever seen who played this card was this guy named Ray Knowles, who was a absolute genius, probably an autistic genius, who was an incredibly accomplished Magic player in the Bay Area while I was kind of ruling the roost in Santa Cruz. And he played with this card before I saw anyone else do it. He was using it as a sideboard card. It's very innocuous. Imagine this in the context of modern Magic.
Yeah. What's it called?
3 mana to cast. It's called Disrupting Scepter. Sorry, I should have said that.
Oh, you're good. That's awesome.
3 mana to cast, 3 mana to activate. And very importantly, you can only pay the 3 mana on your turn during Yeah, it can only be used during your turn. It's not sorcery speed, but you can only play the scepter on your turn. That's very important because in Magic, you draw a card off the top of your deck before you can generally do anything with it. So if you can make somebody discard at instant speed, you could make them discard their draw every turn if this thing could tap on your opponent's turn.
Yeah.
Either way, it's 6 mana commitment for the first time to make your opponent discard one card of their choice. How horrendously shitty is that? Imagine if I had a sorcerer that said 6 mana, discard 1.
Compare that to a twist, yeah.
Yeah, in Modern Magic, all those effects generally cost 1 mana, not 6. So it's 6 mana for the first card. Then it's 9 for the second. And it's 12 for the third. At what point does this suddenly become valuable? And the calculus that most people realize was never. It's not good enough, except in one archetype, the deck, where your only strategy is survival and card domination. In that environment, this suddenly becomes a real weapon. You don't need to mind twist them for 6 all at once. It turns out that if they don't kill you, you can do it over 6 turns. The same thing was true for the counterpart to it, which I actually only played one copy of back in the day. Find it for you. This amazing thing.
Wow.
Look at that artwork.
Look at the art, yeah.
Jayemde Tome. Not pronounced tomb for some reason. People call it, they call it tomb all the time.
Tome,
I have no idea why. But tome, a book, right? This card is 8 mana, draw 1. Is that a good card in Magic?
Not compared
8
to
mana,
yeah.
draw 1. Horrendous, like unplayable garbage. Most people that saw Jayemde Tome are like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
There's a card called Ancestral Recall. It's 1 blue mana, draw 3. This is 8 mana, draw 1. How can these cards both be in the same competitive deck? And yet, objectively, this wins more games than Ancestral Recall because it's not restricted. These two cards provided the backbone of the deck's strategy, more the scepter actually than the tome. And by replacing Mind Twist and Library of Alexandria with these two and refining the strategy further, basically paying attention to the data and realizing, you know what, I don't need 4 Juggernauts actually. And I definitely don't need Mahamudi Jinns. They're way too expensive. How many creatures do I need actually to really reliably win in time before my opponent maybe draws out of the lock?
Yeah.
That number eventually was 2. And it was 2 copies of probably the most iconic Magic card outside of Black Lotus. Sarah Angel.
Sarah Angel.
Yep. A card that was so good and such a power outlier in this era that everybody assumed when they got it in a pack that it was rare. You think this has to be at least as rare as a Shivan Dragon. It's most of the time it's a way better creature.
What does she do?
And yet it's an uncommon 4/4 flying with vigilance, which is the ability where in Magic, just like in Hearthstone, creatures tap to attack. Right? In Hearthstone, do they turn sideways or did they gray out or something?
Sideways is defensive. They start out in either direction that you want.
Oh, that's right. You know what? Actually, I just realized.
Turn,
yeah, in Magic, that's a distinction between. It's been a while since I played Hearthstone, anything other than Battlegrounds. But yeah, in Magic, there's a distinction. If a creature is untapped, it generally means that it hasn't done anything that turn.
Okay.
And sending your creature into battle requires you to turn it sideways. And the rule says that a creature that's sideways cannot be used as a blocker. So your guys are modal. They either are attacking or they're defending.
Yeah.
But they can't be both unless they have this ability called vigilance, which allows them to attack without tapping. They just hit the opponent and then stay put. So the Sarah Angel provides not only a clock on the opponent's 20 life, but it also provides a wall of defense, an additional layer of defense. And the question is, how many of those to run? Do you want 4? Well, in a lot of games, you're playing a long game, and all you're trying to do is survive. You're not trying to win. You're letting the opponent just throw himself on you in all these ways, bolting you and chain lightning you. You're like, yeah, I take 3. I take 3. I take 3. How many cards do you have in your hand now? You have 2? Okay. Oh, you side blast me and I'm at 7? Okay. You got 1 card left. I'll play a scepter and knock it out of your hand. And they're like, oh shit, the Wheel of Fortune that I was hoping to play to draw 7 new cards. And now they're like, draw a card. That's a land. I guess I play that. Next turn they draw, I don't know, some card they can't even necessarily cast. And I'm like, discard the card from your hand, plunk down into the graveyard. 12 turns later, there's a Sarah out. Take 4, take 4. And my hand is all counter spells.
Yeah.
That's how it worked. And I realized very quickly that if I knit the right ratio of things together, sculpted around the restricted list at the time, that this strategy was indomitable. Nothing beat it. Nothing was even close.
Mm.
And I proved that emphatically in a tournament that I played in called Dundracon, which was a huge card gaming convention I think in San Francisco. And I played in Dundracon right after the Dark came out. I can actually check this. Oh, hold on one sec, Gav.
Yeah.
Okay. The Dark, the 4th expansion set of Magic the Gathering, was released on August 8th, 1994. I'm going to relay. Actually, I'll wait to tell you this story in a second. It's like, now I'll say that it's not appropriate for the podcast. But anyway, the Dark had a card in it called Blood Moon, which, remember how I told you before about how when you play with Magic cards and they are iconic and simple, that you can develop almost a synesthetic relationship with the card.
Yeah.
This card was like a giant fuck you to me personally. That's really what it felt like, because I had been working on this strategy a little bit, and word had kind of been getting out here and there that there was like this innovation that was beginning to percolate. You know, people were talking about on the Usenet. I hadn't tested it yet in a big giant arena, and I'd only been kind of locally dominating with the deck. And in retrospect, my conclusions about this were completely wrong, because Magic sets are developed like a year in advance. I don't know how long the Dark had been developed for, but it was like they foresaw a problem with the fact that the game was like becoming more populated with cards.
Yeah.
And that's that they had printed this land cycle at the start of Magic known as the dual land cycle. Show you one. These are also incredibly iconic. This is a good choice. This is another painting that Josh Patel had in his collection. This is Savannah.
It's awesome. So it counts
Beautiful,
as 2
yeah.
different types of lands, or?
Exactly. It not only does it count as 2 types of lands, it makes either color, green or white. And as the way that Magic has evolved mechanically over all the years is that having land type is such a massive advantage for so many different reasons. Savannah is the best green-white mana-producing land ever printed, and it was printed in alpha. Sorry, I got to keep it distracted.
No, you're fine.
My wife Alexis just walked in. So why was I talking about Savannah and dual lands?
The Dark. You were talking about the Dark and the card.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Gab, you're amazing. Thank you for writing the ship there. So there was this enchantment that was released in the Dark that was designed to address the fundamental problem that these lands that they made in alpha, which were rares, and therefore they were not meant to be like, I have 40 of them or 160 of them or whatever. They are just too good. They were just like overwhelmingly strong, and they made it too easy to play all 5 colors, and they really constrain people's creativity in a way.
Yeah.
And that's actually been borne out in most cases. Most of the time when there's dual lands around, I don't know, it causes problems with the format. And so this enchantment is called Blood Moon, and it's a stark picture of this blood red orb in the sky. It's a 3-mana enchantment, and it turns all dual lands, all of these amazing lands that provide multiple colors of mana, as well as the Library of Alexandria and all the other special lands, into basic mountains, which are like, well, when you're playing a essentially blue-white control deck, basic mountains are worse than almost nothing. They're horrendous and totally useless for your particular strategy.
Gotcha.
Anyway, this enchantment, if they put it into play playing as a red deck, they turn all of your lands into garbage, and thank you so much. And you can't cast any spells, which means they don't even have to figure out a way to destroy your lands. They can just blow all your lands up at once for 3 mana. It felt like very personal.
Yeah.
I'm like, I mean, imagine a card like that in Hearthstone. If your opponent is playing Druid, they lose for 3 mana.
Yeah.
Or it'd be something like, if your opponent is playing Druid, you can only play warrior cards from now on in your Druid deck. A card like that costs 3.
Right.
It would kind of suck to play as a Druid player. So the card was basically like that. And I had prepared for it a little bit in my strategy, but I wasn't really expecting that people would play it because I personally objected to the card so much that I kind of assumed that people would actually just be decent and they would respect the tacit sportsmanship of the game to
Yeah.
not play something so unsportsmanlike.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like it's one thing to land destroy your opponent, but to play this like idiotic brain dead 3-mana enchantment that just basically kills anybody playing an interesting deck instantly.
Right.
Like who would do that? Well, I found out who would do that because I went to DungeonCon. It's a 2-day event, 256 person single elim brackets on both days,
Mm-hmm.
and eventually cutting to a top 8 where you would play 3 rounds to the conclusion. And I annihilated the field on day 1. I went undefeated, as you'd have to, and went into the final day. Actually, I guess they could you lose? Yeah, maybe I don't know. Swiss wasn't a thing back then, so maybe it was a double elim tournament.
Okay.
Either way, I mowed down the field and went 6-0 or something on the first day. And I'm number 1 seed in the top 8 at that point. There's another flight the second day, and that creates, I guess it was only, we cut to a top 4. So there's 2 top 4s from both days. And then on the final day of the event, everybody is consolidated into a top 8, and we play off. And I crushed the guy in round 1, and I crushed the guy in round 2. And in round 3, I sit down across this kid, and I've heard on relatively high authority over the span of the event that the kid is playing with Blood Moon in his deck. And not just 1, but 4 copies of it. He's playing some asinine, brainless mono red deck with 4 copies of Blood Moon and then a bunch of like artifact creatures and burn spells.
Yeah.
That's his whole deck. And I'm playing the deck, this thing that is like every time you play it, it's like conducting a symphony.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea that the idiot outside who's like beating his head against the wall or to create percussion is somehow on even ground with your entire symphony. It's sort of like how it felt like. It felt like a real it just felt like a slight.
Mm-hmm.
And I resented him and I was pissed off. And I don't know, maybe we were probably about the same age. Again, I'm 19 years old. I haven't turned 20 yet. I sit down across from this guy and I'm just seething, staring at him with this like burning hatred in my eyes. It's very embarrassing to describe this. And I'm just staring at him and giving him, the death stare, like looming across the table and trying to be as intimidating as I could be, which probably was not very intimidating. And he starts like shifting around nervously in his seat. He looks at me eventually and he goes, "Did I do something in a past life to offend you? Because we've never met."
Yeah.
And I look at him and I go, "You play with Blood Moon. And I hate people who play with Blood Moon." And I really meant it. Because I like fucking hate, I loathe this guy.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, we began the game. In game 1, I killed him with, I think, Mirror Universe, which I was using at the time. Game 2, he got Blood Moon out very, very early, like on turn 2 before I could do anything. And I died to it, of course.
Yeah.
And in game 3, he goes all in with a Black Lotus to cast a Juggernaut on turn 1. And I have Black Lotus of my own to cast Moat, which is a white enchantment that he has no ability to interact with. He literally can't destroy it in his whole deck. And it prevents all of his creatures on the ground from attacking.
Oh, wow.
And there's no fucking chance he's beating me with his burn spells. So it literally kills him on turn 1. And he fights gamely. Like the game goes long and he gets me down to like 8, but it's never close.
Mm-hmm.
And I wind up winning the tournament. And after the tournament is over, these 2 guys from Wizards of the Coast come up to me, it turns out. These 2 like older dudes. And they're like, "Hey, we want to talk to you about your deck. We're from Wizards of the Coast, from the company. We want to kind of like understand what's going on here." And I told them like essentially the gospel on the spot.
Wow.
I'm like, "This deck wins for this reason. Write it down." And that started it. Truly, it started it. What happened afterward was that a friend of mine named Paul Pantera, who happened to work at Sun Microsystems in the Bay Area, I met him playing Magic the Gathering, and he became kind of a disciple of sorts. He played the deck as best he could and played it competently and did well in events and stuff,
Yeah.
and was always talking to me about the theory. But there was an absolute hierarchy, and I was at the pinnacle authority in this space for honestly obvious reasons.
Hmm.
So whatever I said about this design was generally considered gospel. I wrote articles about it on the Usenet. I started discussing it there. I was very free with the information. I wound up establishing a brain trust with a brilliant player out in the Sacramento area, a guy named John Imerdino. And he and I became really, really close friends and continued to iterate on the control archetype. And I was always kind of the mouthpiece for it. And Paul Pantera, who I met playing Magic by way of working on Sun Microsystems, was very active on the Usenet. And he wrote a like seminal article about the deck where he sent it out APB to the whole world. Magic the Gathering has been solved in the Bay Area. Come at us.
Wow.
Yeah. And at the time, like the overlap between extremely well educated, tech savvy, connected nerds and
Yep.
Magic was almost absolute on the early internet. I might have mentioned this to you in our last conversation,
Yeah.
but it bears repeating. According to Titus Chalk, who was a guy I met when he interviewed me for a book he wrote about Magic, according to him, back in 1994 or whatever, the number one most discussed topic on the Usenet, on the internet itself, was the weather, not sex. Number two was Magic the Gathering.
That's insane.
Insane. Think about that. What a
Wow.
different world we live in
Yeah,
now.
seriously.
Seriously, who ranks higher, fucking Kim Kardashian or Richard Garfield?
Yeah, unfortunate.
Unfortunate. Or fucking, how about Hawktua Girl? Who's more famous,
Please.
Hawktua Girl or Richard Garfield?
Yeah. How much money do you have in
Society,
Hawk
raise
coin?
your fucking standards. Seriously.
Yep.
Anyway, so I talked to these two dudes or whatever. Oh no, that's right. I was talking about Paul Pantera. So Paul throws down the gauntlet basically to the rest of the collective Magic world, and he says, "We have arrived at the solution." And everyone's like, "No, no, no! You know, my land destruction deck beats it. My Juzam Jin Serendib deck beats it. My Hymn deck beats it." Eventually, people start building it in their communities, and it's a very hard deck to play well.
Yeah.
You can arrive at some very spurious conclusions playing it if you don't understand how to pilot it. It takes a lifetime of mastery. I've been playing the deck for over 30 years, and I would say I'm objectively the best player of that archetype on Earth. I have the most experience, and I created it. So I understand it in my DNA. That said, there are many masters of it all over the planet, people who have been grinding for years. And even back then, people had enough skill to pick it up and read my articles and stuff about
Right.
it and figure it out. And all of a sudden, they just start beating everyone. Like no one can touch it.
Mm-hmm.
And it completely transforms how people play and understand Magic the Gathering going forward. It was irrevocably transformed and for the better. So that leads up to the present. Played Magic the Gathering on the Pro Tour from 1996 through 2000. My last tournament was in 2001, and it happened to correspond. What a finale for my career.
Right.
It was held the same weekend as the September 11th attacks
Oh,
in New York City at
that's
Madison Square
terrible.
Garden.
Wow.
Can you imagine that?
What a damper.
Yeah, I played it was a team competition with 3 people. I hadn't played on the Pro Tour in over a year. I just didn't really, I stopped caring because the rewards were just non-existent.
Yeah.
And I think I was playing Diablo 2 at that point also. So I had something more interesting to do anyway
Yeah.
than just like to grind the formats for the Pro Tour. So I stopped playing on the Pro Tour, but then a friend of mine in the Bay Area named Wayne Chang, who's a quite good friend of mine, and actually he's like the head MC of for many, many years of Live at the Bike. He's very big in the poker world.
Okay.
Anyway, Wayne comes to me and he says, "Hey Brian, our friend Euban wants to try to qualify for a pro event. Would you like to be on our team?" And I'm like, "Fuck yeah, guys, let's do it." And we won 2 qualifiers, and we went to that Pro Tour where we did not do well, but and it concluded with me flying out of New York City on the night of Monday, December 10th, 2001.
Yeah.
Flying out of New York City the night before the city was attacked.
Yeah.
Is a crazy story in and of itself. Anyway, that was the last like competitive Magic I played at a pro level. But I just continued to kind of dabble with the game. I enjoyed being a thought leader and an authority on it. So I kept a copy of the deck together all the time. I played randomly I'd go to Magic tournaments and stuff just to hang out and see people, and I'd gunsling and play. We didn't play for Anti anymore at that point,
Yeah.
but there's still ego invested
Of
a
course.
lot.
Yeah.
So I'd always have people like stepping up, wanting to challenge me, and was able to more than hold my own. Although the format started to change a lot,
Mhm.
starting around 98, 99, 2000. Do you know who Patrick Chapin is?
I do not.
I, anyone who probably is in the Magic
Yeah.
world, at least has been for a while, would recognize his name instantly. He's a very close friend of mine and one of my closest confidants, actually. He's called the Innovator, Patrick Chapin, the Innovator,
Yeah.
for a reason. He's a very accomplished author and theorist and one of the most brilliant humans alive. And back in the early Pro Tour, Chapin was innovating as fast as he could, which meant he was exploring combo strategies as more and more cards were printed that created like a critical mass that made combo suddenly a real contender for the throne.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, you know how Hearthstone used to have like some semblance of balance, and there would be like aggro would be the best for a while, and then
Mhm.
and then control would get good for a while. Back when there was a lot of care done in
Yeah.
that.
Yep.
I don't know if it's still the same anymore, but the last time I played it, it didn't feel that way. It just felt like everything was just pure rush aggro.
I haven't
Like
played
every
in
turn, every
years in
card's
standard.
insane.
Yeah.
So Magic had that too, and for a while, due to how dominating the deck was, control was just the pinnacle archetype. Everything else was A tier or below. The
Yeah.
only S tier deck was control. And gradually, by the late 1990s, that started to change. And Chapin was always the architect of that change, as far as I was concerned. Every time he and I overlapped at the Pro Tour, he would show up with some ridiculous, degenerate combo deck.
Yeah.
And after a while, I started losing consistently to his decks. I didn't have the tools to stop them because too many insane cards were made. And talking about Patrick Chapin.
His combo deck.
Yeah, prior to that, talking about just sort of like the tail end of my my Magic career. Yeah, why was I talking about Chapin's combo deck? Oh, I guess I'm just talking about like the role that I was playing in Magic in general.
Mm-hmm.
The trend that basically Chapin discovered, the trend that was sort of coming into the game, was that other archetypes were becoming increasingly better.
Yeah.
And so even though the deck was malleable and I kept adjusting it and changing it, there was a guy named Oscar Tan who wrote an article that was a recurrent article on what would eventually become the most preeminent resource for Magic discussions, called the Dojo, which I think was founded in 1996.
That's funny.
He did an art. Oh, what's that?
I actually, while researching you, I found some dojo articles, like from, I think every 2 years or so, that you updated the deck, I guess, and the strategy.
Right on. So you were able to find that stuff. It's so cool. It's so cool that it's still around.
I
Great
had to go
research,
to the
by
web
way.
archive to find it.
I
Yeah,
see.
it's buried.
Yeah, the Wayback Machine.
Yep.
Isn't that insane that was like almost 30 years
Yeah.
ago? What the hell? I watch a lot of Street Fighter 2 Champion Edition on YouTube, which is it's not my favorite version of Street Fighter, but it's probably my second favorite.
Yeah.
And I watch that game and I compare it to Street Fighter 6, which is what, like the Gen Alpha's version of Street Fighter is.
Right.
I'm like, how are these two games? How is it this much worse after 30 years?
I know. Yeah.
How did they manage to make a game so much worse after 31, 32 years of iteration? Should I just say that the current version of Street Fighter is an encapsulation of the zeitgeist of the culture?
Yeah.
It's got to be that. It's certainly like a canary in a coal mine. So anyway, in early 2000s, mid 2000s, I was just focused on kind of the next big thing in my life that was no longer, Magic just became less important. It just felt like there was no reason to devote a lot of time and toil to this activity because I felt like I had taken it as far as I could go.
Yeah.
And I had been a global thought leader. I'd been objectively famous. I was a commentator on ESPN2 alongside my friend and Pro Tour colleague, Chris Pakula. And when I listen to the commentary that I did back then, it makes me cringe about how horrible it is.
Yeah.
In retrospect. But according to a lot of people, Chris and I were their two favorite commentators because of what we brought on board in terms of both humor and insight.
Mm-hmm.
and just our dynamic and stuff. There've been lots of other commentary teams, but a lot of people have said that Chris and I were the best at it.
Yeah.
So I did that for ESPN, which was crazy, and I told my parents about it and
That's
stuff. They're like,
absolutely
"You're on
crazy.
ESPN for Magic? What?" But it hadn't produced anything that was tangible to them.
Yeah.
Because everything that Magic had brought me was kind of immaterial to an extent. It was invisible in terms of how it got my brain to think better in novel ways
Hmm.
and problem solve. And it allowed me to create both reputation and connections to the whole world through the game. I was just kind of friends with people all over the globe
Yeah.
because I got a lot of email correspondence. And every time somebody wrote me, I took the time to connect to them.
Yeah.
I wrote long paragraphs and stuff, introducing myself, answering their questions in detail, giving them deck lists. I interacted with every person without a publicist, and I spent hours and hours and hours and hours and hours doing that.
Yeah.
When I went to events, I did outreach and I talked to people, and I'd sit there and go through their deck with them and play games with them and stuff. Like I really, really made a point to integrate myself with the community because it was, the lifeblood of what I cared about. And I remember very specifically meeting these three guys from Mexico, three Mexican pros. Two of them were named Homero and Gustavo, and they had one other guy with them. These three guys had qualified to come from Mexico. I don't know where they lived. Maybe I think they lived in Mexico City, and they had
Yeah.
come to the Magic the Gathering Pro Tour
Wow.
in New York or whatever to play on the big stage. You can imagine like how their friends and family must have felt, and all the local players, because it was like mythical to be on the Pro Tour.
Yeah.
And they come up to meet me. I'm just walking around, and they're like, and they called me Tio Brian Weissman.
Yeah.
Yeah, I learned later like how much of a term of endearment that is.
Mm.
Um, yeah, crazy story about that. All right, if you'll allow me.
Go for it.
In 1996, the World Championship was held right up here in Seattle, like right in the shadow of Mount Rainier, which I can see through my window over here. And it was held at the Wizards of the Coast Game Center, which had just been constructed in the U District in Seattle. It was like this experiment by them to create these dens of iniquity, so to speak. It's sort of like the model, actually, of what Mox Boarding House is here in Seattle,
Okay.
without the Card Kingdom part of it, without the secondary market, but like a big internet cafe where people could congregate and play Magic in a kind of real safe space
Awesome.
with access to food and basic product and stuff. So to inaugurate that, they held the World Championship there. And they introduced this brand new format called extended format, which was a splinter from the established vintage. It's now known as vintage. It was called Type 1 back then. And they had created this extended format as a way to give newer players an opportunity to play the game at a high level where they weren't going to be overpowered by people who had Black Lotuses and Moxes and stuff.
Yeah.
So they were using this event as their sort of inauguration for the extended format. You had to play it at Worlds. And Homero was at the tournament. I don't know if Gustavo qualified, but Homero was at this event. And even though I wasn't actually playing in Worlds, I was just there to do commentary and spectate. I had play tested for it because I thought it was interesting. And I had built this deck, this mono blue deck that was abusing this card called Mana Crypt. And as soon as I say Mana Crypt, I'm sure anybody in the audience who's played Commander, their ears will perk up. Because Mana Crypt for many, many years in the Commander format has been the most powerful card in the format, bar none. And it's so format warping and powerful that it actually recently had to get banned. Just to kind of like draw back the power level a little bit and the speed that the format had taken on. Because Mana Crypt just enabled very unfun, uninteractive starts. In this extended format, Mana Crypt was a lot of the time in Magic when I design stuff, it's about finding exploits, essentially.
Yeah.
Like what is overpowered that is either innocuous or that just hasn't been addressed yet. And it's a very sort of standard thing you do in modern constructed formats in Magic, but back then it was, I'd say, a little bit more innovative. The card that was exploitable in this format was the card Mana Crypt. It was unrestricted. You could play with 4 copies of it. And it gave you this insane accelerated boost over your opponent, with a caveat that at the beginning of your turn, essentially, before you even draw a card, you have to flip a coin. And if you lose the coin flip, you take 3 damage. And you start the game at 20. So you lose a seventh of your life every time you lose a flip.
Wow.
On average, it deals 1.5 damage to you a turn, and that could be more than lethal. Because you could take over a game with a mana crypt, and then you're taking like an average. If you got 2 of them out, you're taking 3 damage a turn on average.
Yeah.
Your opponent doesn't have to do anything, and you
Right.
just die to your own mana crypt. So the card is a high risk, but there was an exploit with it. Not only was it unrestricted, it had a rule at the time that if it were tapped, exhausted during your upkeep, you didn't have to flip the coin.
Oh,
So then it was just a matter of, and you couldn't just tap it for mana because you would take the unspent mana as damage at the end of the phase. It was called mana burn. But if you spent the mana during your upkeep, you could shut the mana crypt off and not take any damage and not have to roll. So I built a whole deck around this concept using 4 mana crypts and jam day tomes and other artifacts that you activated during your upkeep to spend the mana crypt mana so that it didn't hurt you anymore. And the rest of the deck was basically mono blue control with multiple copies of this card called Amnesia, which was insanely powerful with 4 mana crypts in your deck. Amnesia costs 6 mana, 3 blue and 3 generic. And you look at your opponent's hand, you look at their hand, and then they have to discard everything that isn't a land.
whoa.
So most of the time, that's their whole hand.
Yeah.
So it ran multiple copies of Amnesia, 4 mana crypts, etc. I had tested the deck, and it seemed to work well in competition. But I didn't I didn't really fully prepare for the event. And testing showed that it was good and effective, but it just, it felt gimmicky.
Yeah.
Anyway, before the extended event happened, Homero came up to me and he's like, Brian, he goes, Tio Brian, we've tried all these extended decks. We don't really know what to play. Do you have any secret tech? And I'm like, as a matter of fact, I do. I unzip my binder and I hand him the lightsaber. Here, Padawan, take the lightsaber. Go lay waste to your foes. He did exactly that. He went undefeated the next day.
Yo.
Like amnesiaing people over and over again. Like everyone in the whole tournament was talking about it. This crazy Mexican guy that's like amnesiaing everybody. An amazing story about that event at Wizards. But I think this would make like a good segue into kind of the next chapter.
Yeah.
To conclude the Magic piece, basically, I have been playing the game for the last. I never stopped really. I never just went a long period of time without playing a couple games of Magic. But I went through a lull in the kind of 2000s where there just wasn't really any reason to play. I wasn't playing professionally anymore. I was busy with other gaming stuff, including beginning design on Path of Exile all through like the early 2000s.
Right.
And didn't really find a lot of time to play or think about Magic. I kind of just let other people do it. And in about, I think, 13 or 14 years ago, so it would have been like 2011, 2012, I was introduced to Commander format because I had been playing singleton formats on Magic Online, which is it used to be the main way that Wizards hosted digital Magic, although
Okay.
Arena's most likely obsolesced it.
Mm-hmm.
But back then, Magic Online was the only way to like play real Magic on digital form. You could play in third-party things and stuff, but
Right.
it wasn't like actually really playing the game. Magic Online felt close enough to the real game that it really felt like you were playing real Magic, and it was great, and you couldn't manipulate it in any way.
Yeah.
And so I was playing singleton formats, 60-card singleton, then 100-card singleton, and then eventually, actually no, it was 100-card singleton that got turned into 60-card singleton, at which point I lost interest in it, and I pivoted over to the other 100-card singleton format, which is called Commander format.
Gotcha.
And as soon as I started playing Commander, and I played it only as a 1v1 thing, I had no interest in playing it multiplayer. And I'm sure for avid Commander players in your audience, and I would imagine that the overlap between people who play casual Commander in your audience is like absolute.
Yeah.
Or close to absolute. I'll talk more about this later on, I think. It'll probably come up again. But playing that format in multiplayer just did not feel like Magic to me. It felt sacrilegious. It felt like aimless.
Mm.
It felt extremely political. And I realized this right away. Everyone's like playing Commander. I'm like, okay, cool. I'll play Commander with you. Sure, let's try it. I sit down, I play a 4-player game. I have a terrible time.
Yeah.
I play again. I have a terrible time. I pretty quickly realized that the only way I can enjoy myself is if I just sit there and I act like an obsequious idiot at the table. And I'm not kidding about that. Like an obsequious idiot was the only strategy that worked for me as when I played Commander,
Why is
where
that?
I would sit there and I had to be like simpering and extremely like overly polite and complimentary of my opponents.
Uh,
And the thing is that it wasn't, it's weird. It'll make me sound totally sociopathic to say it, but I'm not, when it comes to Magic, I'm like uncompromising about this sort of stuff. I have a very complicated personality, and most of me is exceedingly benevolent, honestly, to a fault, and trusting. But Magic is its own deal. When I play Magic, I'm trying to win. Winning is the goal for me. That's how I derive enjoyment from it.
yeah.
And so I'm sitting there at a game of Commander trying to figure out, like, what is the strategy here? What are the problems to solve? And I realized pretty quickly it has nothing to do with my deck at all. It has nothing to do with my cards. It's just about, I have to play a political game with people I don't know,
Mm,
who've done nothing, honestly, to earn my respect
yeah.
as players. Nothing. In fact, all I do is I just see them make incredible mistakes over and over and over and over and over again and get rewarded for those mistakes. It's like just teaches them to be mediocre at the game.
Mm,
So that's not my thing. I'm like, okay, I'm done with this. I'm not going to try to play Commander multiplayer, but I really like the deck design. It's really interesting. The decks are so complicated. Like I have a stable of decks that I've played for the last 14 years, and almost every one of them, any deck that I've really put a lot of time and work into, and I have a very good collaborator in this, who should definitely be linked in your channel somewhere, my friend Nate Prawdzik, who is a
okay.
phenomenal Commander player and designer of Commander decks. He's like my co-collaborator. Every deck that Nate and I have built, or decks that I built on my own, is like a tuned masterpiece. They're all ridiculously insane, like a perfect Mozart symphony.
I'd expect nothing less.
Ev Thank you. I appreciate that, and it's true. And I say this as a full objectivist in everything that I say. Like one thing that I'll try to communicate to your audience, because I say a lot of things that may sound hyperbolic and certainly braggadocious, even arrogant, is that I am an objectivist as best as I can ascertain that. I have spent my life applying the scientific method to every opinion that I harbor. And I believe that I have a strong mind for this
Mhm.
and that I can discern fact from fiction. I've been totally deceived and led astray many times, particularly recently by AI manipulations, mostly, I think.
Mm,
But fundamentally, developing the mechanism to be discerning, to be skeptical and
yeah.
thoughtful, introspective, and so on. And a part of this is, of course, personal objectivity as well. I talk about it a lot in my disc golf series about how you need to be honest with yourself, good or bad,
Yeah.
in equal amounts, to be a functional and strong human being. So uh, I diverged too much again.
Commander just wasn't your bag.
Yes. Okay. So getting back to Commander. I tried to play Commander objectively. I'm trying to win a game of Magic, and nothing works that is remotely congruous with playing Magic well. In fact,
Yeah.
it's the opposite. I get punished for playing the game well, actually punished, because I just get stronger in the game, and then everyone just gangs up more, and they get resentful. They rage quit. They honestly insult me. It's insane. And so I'm like, okay, I'm not going to do this. This is not for me.
Yeah.
I'm going to go play 1v1 Magic as best as I can play it in modern day, because all of the regular constructed formats are just linear trash.
Yeah.
I've watched people play standard and modern and so on. The decks are so linear. You don't have to do anything.
Mm,
They're like, it's, they're not Magic. It's just play the 1-drop that's insane. Play the 2-drop that's insane. Remove the thing and play the 3-drop. It's not, it doesn't require you to flex and make your mind strong.
yeah.
So no interest in any of those formats. Commander seemed to be the one place where that wasn't true, because you can build a deck that's extremely intricate. It's not abusive, but that's just strong. And you are constantly being forced into situations where you have to problem solve. And you have exponentially branching decision trees. You know, within 2 or 3 moves, you're into infinity practically, to say nothing for move 10 and 20. And every good deck is filled with fetching and silver bullets and all of this situational interaction.
Yep.
Your mind has to think in 4 dimensions, you know, predicting the future over and over and over again about what's likely to happen based on the range of what they could have out of a pool of tens of thousands of cards.
Exactly.
It's mind-boggling how
Yeah.
complicated it is. So I really, really love that. My brain latches onto that, and I can play the game at an insane level. I'll give you an example. I have a win streak online right now in Commander format that is 150 games in a row without losing. Try that on for size.
That's
In
crazy.
any format, it doesn't matter how soft your opponents are. Most of my opponents are random. I specifically avoid people who say CEDH. So that's one of the things that I have used to create the win streak. Because at a certain point, I'm like, I just want to see how far can I push this.
Hmm.
But I have tons of tough matches that I used to make videos about that are crazy ass comebacks, down to the wire, stretching every life point to keep the streak going, figuring out ways to win. And my whole channel exhibits that. Those videos are unique in this space. If you want to learn how to play Magic well, watch my Commander videos, watch my old school videos, because I talk through every single process. I tell you exactly what I'm doing and why.
Yeah.
And to the best of my ability, I've seen no one in the entire world who makes what I do in the Magic space. It's really unique. Anyway, that sort of takes me up to the present. Magic has been the backbone of my adult life
Yeah.
from 19 to 50. I'm getting close to 51 now. For the last 31 years, and I think about it all the time. I still design. Nate is always getting me to play Commander as a tandem thing these days, which is pretty fun.
Yeah.
But I haven't really been working on the channel very much. I think I just have focus on other game stuff.
Hmm.
But it's always back there. It's always informing everything that I do. And it's not just in game design or gameplay. It teaches you how to think on a different level, objectively.
Yeah.
It just, the way you have to think to problem solve in the context of a difficult game of Magic will make you stronger and smarter, no matter who you are.
Yeah. The overlap of brain power that culminated in the 90s surrounding that game is just absolutely insane. And the amount of people that you know through that too is mind-boggling.
Legendary. It's
Hmm.
one of the biggest, it's honestly, in my opinion, one of the biggest untold stories in history in terms of how it has shaped and forged human history at
Yeah.
this point.
Yeah.
The, my friend, cousin, Mark Ostrich, the one I talked to you about
Hmm.
before, the documentarian who made the Method series, who also make Shark Week and a bunch of other stuff on premium HBO Hulu stuff.
Yeah.
He he and I are co-developing a documentary that is it's actually, I'm not sure if I'm crazy about the title. I trust his judgment about it, but I'm not crazy about it.
Hmm.
The title is going to be something like The Rise of the Crypto Kings. That's what he wants to call it. Or maybe it's the Crypto Bros.
Yeah.
And I think that the title is catchy and likely to resonate with the public, and maybe it's the right one, but it feels a little derogatory because I'm featured heavily in the series or in the planned documentary, and I've done a bunch of interviews for it already. And I'm not a crypto bro. I'm not even close to a crypto bro. In fact,
Yeah.
I fucking hate crypto,
Yeah.
but it's a later story. Anyway, that story tells this chronology going all the way back to the 1980s and stuff of just a subset of the population, nearly all male, I think, uh, who segued through competitive fighting games, some sports, early internet, Magic the Gathering, and
Hmm.
then into either poker or crypto. And I'm sorry, digital gaming first, and then poker, and then crypto, and then world domination.
Right.
Objectively, like
Yeah.
this, the United States government is a crypto government. They're like talking about using crypto to finance mortgages and stuff
I
now.
know. I know.
It's lunacy, right? So
Yeah.
anyway, um, it tells the story of that, and at the heart of it is this inaugural Magic class, the one you just talked about.
Hmm.
I wanted to call the documentary Master Class, but Mark thinks it's a little too confusing and probably maybe too complimentary. Um, okay, so that sort of takes us up to the present, I think. And that
Yeah.
was a long discussion. Thank you for being so patient.
I loved it, man. Every minute of it. And just to end that section off, what would you say is your biggest achievement from that era? Was it creating the deck, or was it something smaller, something more?
I think it's the fact that I never let it change who I was at all. at any point. I think it's the fact that I was able to be authentically myself through the whole process from the very beginning of when I was just setting foot into a competitive ecosystem all the way up to the very pinnacle,
Yeah.
as high as it went, prior to the modern pro tour. But I mean, no, objectively, no Magic pros have ever gotten actually really famous from it. The closest one, in my opinion, is David Williams. Remember him?
I don't. I was going to ask if you knew Brian Kibler. That's the one that I'm familiar with. He played a lot of Hearthstone.
Kibler's like maybe it's hard to really know, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if you had gone back 10 years ago, it's no contest. David Williams way more famous.
Yeah.
Dave Williams got famous, internet famous, when he segued from Magic the Gathering to poker in an incredibly dramatic way.
Yeah.
He won a satellite seat, I think, in the 2004 World Series of Poker and got all the way to the finals
Wow.
in front of right as the poker boom was happening after Chris Moneymaker won, I think in 2003.
Yeah.
And he won $3.5 million, which to all the other Magic players at the time were like, why the fuck are we playing Magic?
Right.
When David Williams is a good player, but he's not in the top 50.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that he had this gigantic score in poker was like a big wake up call to all the Magic players. Like, oh, wait a minute, maybe we should be playing poker instead.
Yeah.
I didn't get involved in poker. I kind of detested it. I hated the fact that it was like, it seemed very simple to me. And it was also a negative sum game, where you just like claw and scratch with other people.
Yeah.
For your livelihood. It just
Right.
felt shitty. And it took advantage of dumb people, honestly. So I didn't really like playing poker. I certainly didn't enjoy playing it with any real stakes of any consequence.
Mm-hmm.
And through the whole time that I went from being basically a total unknown in the Magic world to being a very famous person, David Williams, famous for poker. I think you're right about Kibler. Kibler's worked very, very hard through both Hearthstone and then eventually back to Magic again. I see him like moving much, much back into his foundational area. Yeah, maybe he is the most famous, whatever. Anyway, I have enjoyed, it's not to Kibler levels, of course, but within the Magic community, enjoyed a real level of celebrity.
Yeah.
And I never let it change how I interacted with one person. I told you the story about how it sounded so sociopathic, how I hated this guy when he played Blood Moon against me.
Right.
But that was a unique environment and a unique situation. The contempt that I felt for him had to do with his like intellectual laziness in this sanctified game that I really did held sacred.
His lack of a competitive integrity, you could say. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Just being unsportsmanlike is how it felt. Honestly, it just disgusted me. It's one of the reasons why I got Mind Twist eventually banned for that exact reason. I just thought it was extremely unsportsmanlike. It's just too easy to win with it. And anyway, but I held in terms of my own sense of integrity. The entire time that I played Magic on the Pro Tour, from the beginning to the end, back in the fucking Wild West days, where you could, people could commit a billion different transgressions. You could get away with like murder. It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
The amount of things that the rules back then allowed you to get away with. I was never cautioned or cited for anything. I never even got anything close, not even a procedural warning for anything in the entire time I played professionally. And I'm going to tell you one more story, if you'll allow me.
Yeah.
Sort of personify this. I actually had a correspondence pretty recently with this guy on Facebook. His name is John Chinook. And I don't know what he's doing today, but John was one of the best players in the mid to late 1990s.
Okay.
He made at least one Pro Tour top 8. He was consistently performing well, and people called him Happy John. He was like very, very vociferous, very friendly, very interactive as a player. And Happy John and I were playing in a draft event at Pro Tour. I think it was Pro Tour New York. It might have been like 1990. It was 5th edition and Visions, I believe, were the two sets. So whatever era that was, 5th Visions. I had play tested the shit out for this event. And the way that I did that was I designed my own booster packs. I created like a pool of commons, uncommons, one of each rare, and I collated them in a way to simulate good pack distribution. And I used that to practice because it was like I couldn't afford booster packs.
Right,
So
right.
it was the only way to do that and to put in lots of hours. And I had prepared a ton for this event, and I drafted a sick deck in the first round, a blue, red, black monster. It's called Grixis now. And it was an open draft. You could see what others were picking. Is that right? Maybe it was booster draft, actually. Yeah, I think it might have been. Yeah, it was booster draft.
Yeah.
But Happy John and I were sitting near each other, and I could tell based on the common sequence in those packs, which you could memorize quite easily, what was being drafted upstream. I could just figure out which commons were gone and figure out what the people to my right were taking, so I didn't compete with them.
Yeah.
And I got past multiple copies of this card called Manowar. I got like 3 copies of it. Manowar is totally insanely good, a blue creature. And the rest of my deck was like black-red awesomeness with 3 Manowars. My deck was like totally insane, honestly. And I crush my first 2 opponents, and I get into, this is the end of day 1, and both Happy John and I are 5-0. We're both undefeated. So we sit down to play, and Happy John says something to me that is kind of interesting. He goes, do you want to draw? You want to take an intentional draw? And back then, the rules basically allowed you to take an intentional draw, but only at the beginning of the match. Once the match was underway, you had to play it to the bitter bloody end. You couldn't draw at any time.
Yeah.
And anybody who understands like how competition works and the way that the brackets work knows that this rule is idiotic. And of course, it's been obsolesced a million years ago. You can
Right.
intentionally draw for any reason at any time. Also, you can't police it.
Yeah.
Right? It's like a totally weird, capricious rule that everyone hated. We all knew that it was going to be obsolete soon. So I'm looking at my deck and I'm like, no, John, I'm going to play you. My deck's insane. I just want to go 6-0. And he's like, dude, are you sure? If we draw now, we're going to be 5-1. We're going to be number 1 and number 2 seed tomorrow. Like nothing can go wrong. We'll both be in the top 8. It'll be wonderful. And I'm like, no, dude, my deck's amazing. We should play.
Mm-hmm.
So he's like, fine. So we start playing, and I get multiple Manowar draw in game 1, and I annihilate him. It's not even close. He gets just destroyed. Game 2, it's a much more pitched battle, and he draws a good part of his deck in the mid game and kind of gets me behind.
Mm-hmm.
And the game goes pretty long, maybe 20 minutes long, before he finally bleeds me out and I lose because of his early tempo. At which point he looks at me again. He's like, dude, you can see, right? Our decks are evenly matched. We should just draw. And I'm like, well, we can't draw, John.
Right.
We're not allowed to. The rules don't allow us to draw. I'm sorry. We got to play. And he's like, Brian, they're never going to know. Just draw with me. Like, it'll be awesome. And I'm thinking about it. And then he starts whispering in my ear. He's like, you know, our decks are super even. It's basically a coin flip. Do you really want to risk 6-0 on a coin flip? And I'm like, okay, fine. We'll draw. Because there's only like 10 minutes left in the round.
Yeah.
And we can easily just play slow enough to just not win the game. So we kind of look at each other. We don't shake on it, obviously, but we make eye contact. We're like, okay, we're going to draw, right? He's like, we're going to draw, right? And I go, yeah, I guess we'll draw. Fine. So we start playing, and instantaneously after I make this agreement, a judge sits behind me, directly behind me, like pulls up a chair and just rolls up over my right shoulder. A judge named Henry Stern. And I'm like, what the fuck do I do now? Because I already agreed. I gave John my word that I was
Right.
going to draw with him. But now I have a judge looking over my shoulder. I can't like play slow or do dumb things. Obviously, it's going to indicate that I'm drawing on purpose. And of course, as fate would have it, I draw the fucking stone cold nuts. I draw like perfect mana and 3 Manowars. As soon as I draw my opening hand, I know I've already won the game. And so we start. I play a land. John plays a land. I play a land. He plays a land. I play a land and a creature. He plays his first guy on turn 3. I play a Manowar. Manowar is 3 mana. It's a 2/2, and it says it unsummons one of your opponent's creatures when it comes into play.
Oh, wow.
Unbelievable. Imagine that in Hearthstone.
Yeah.
It's totally nuts, right? So I Manowar John's creature and hit him with my guy. He looks at me. He gives me an eyebrow. He puts his guy back into play. On my turn, I Manowar his guy again and I hit him for 4. He has nothing in play. I have 3 creatures now. Because Henry Stern is behind me, like
Right.
looking at my hand. And the only play is play Manowar, of course. So I play the second Manowar and bounce his guy. He gives this exasperated sigh. He takes 4. He untaps, plays a land, taps out and plays his guy again. I draw, and I have to play my third Manowar, bouncing his guy back to his hand. And as he's lifting it up, he gives me this look of sheer horror. Like, you motherfucker, I can't believe you're going to just kill me after we gave a gentleman's agreement to draw. So he lifts this guy up off the table. I smash him for 6. He's already down to like 8, and I have 4 guys in play. The game is over. Like I said, I drew the nuts. On his turn, he plays his creature again. He only has 1 creature to play. So I untap my mana, and I'm looking at my hand, and I have a card in my hand called Vampiric Tutor, which is a 1 black mana instant. It allows you to search your deck for any card and put it on top of your deck so you can just draw it. And I'm looking at it, and I realize that I have one way out of this situation to basically force a draw with some degree of my integrity still intact.
Yeah.
But it's going to require me to do the dumbest play that any person in the history of Magic has ever done, much less Brian Weissman, creator of the deck. And incidentally, there's like 80 people watching the game now because we're almost out of time. And it's Weissman versus Chinook, and we're both 5-0. I go to my upkeep. I announce Vampiric Tutor, which allows me to replace whatever I was going to draw with a specific card. The card that I get out of my deck is Earthquake, which would win the game instantly on that turn if I played it in the correct order. Because all I have to do is swing with all my guys, hit him down to like 2 or something, and then I cast Earthquake, which is a red, what's called X spell. It deals, you pay 1 red to start it, and then whatever additional mana you invest in it, it deals all of that damage to the entire battlefield and to both players.
Wow.
So it's insane. Like, totally, it's a rare, so I was very lucky to get it. It was like one of the insane cards in my already totally insane deck. And so I Vampiric Tutor for Earthquake before I draw to make sure that I get it in my hand. I draw the Earthquake. I sit there and I look at it. I'm like, am I really going to do this? No, I promised John that I would draw with him. And I'm a man of my word. So I think for a long time, and I'm like, you're at 8? And he goes, yeah, I'm at 8 or whatever. And I go, okay, I'm going to tap 4 mana and cast Earthquake for 4. And without missing a beat after I cast or maybe I say I cast Earthquake for 2. That's right, I would have cast it for 2. I play Earthquake for 2, and I show him it, and then I drop it in the graveyard, and then I immediately reach down to my 4 Manowars, or 3 Manowars plus the other creature. They're all 2/2s, basically. And I turn them all sideways, and I go, and I finish you off. And as soon as I do that, as soon as I tap my creatures sideways, Chinook looks at me and he goes, Brian, they're all dead. You just cast Earthquake. Are you stupid? At which point, like 30 people watching this game just scatter. I just see them all like go, and they all run off into different corners of the giant auditorium to go inform people what just happened in this like feature match. And I'm like, oh my God, what did I do? Pick up my Manowars, put them in the graveyard, go. And Chinook is like, play a guy, hit you. Go ahead. And we stall it out and we draw.
Nice.
And we talked about that on Facebook recently, actually, like a couple of weeks ago. I'm like, do you remember that time when I earthquaked away all my Manowars? So to answer your question, in my opinion, my biggest accomplishment is that I was able to be a consistent person through all of that. And honestly, to this day, what made me good at playing Magic was being an objectivist about the evidence that I saw and about my own play and my own performances and my own conclusions and everything. And it sort of just informed the backbone of my entire strategy as a person.
Love it. That concludes my first podcast-style conversation with a developer. I'm brand new to this format, so I genuinely appreciate any constructive feedback in the comments. It'll really help me improve for the next one. Brian was super gracious with his time, and his talent for storytelling made my job as the host so much easier. You'll find links to all of his socials down in the description, and we're planning to sit down again within the next week or so. Part 2 will cover Diablo 2, early 90s to 2000s PC gaming, the founding of Grinding Gear Games, and the origins of Path of Exile. I'll have that video up on my channel within the next few weeks. Did you play Magic the Gathering back in the 90s, or are you still playing today? And which of Brian's stories stuck with you or unlocked a core memory? Definitely let me know down in the comments. I'll be reading and replying to as many as I can, and Brian might even chime in too. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe to my channel for more deep dive interviews and documentaries, and I'll see you in the next one. Farewell.